Welcome to the Jedburgh podcast. I'm the creator and host, Fran Racioppi. Each episode, I speak with transformative leaders, visionaries, drivers of change, and those dedicated to winning no matter the challenge. The Jedburgh podcast is founded in the lineage of the special operations Jedburgh teams of the past and is produced in partnership with Talent War Group, a management consulting and executive search firm focused on helping you optimize the people side of your business. We're sponsored by Jersey Mike Subs. Together, we share the mission of giving, making a difference in someone's life. Visit the Jedburgh Podcast, Talent War Group, and Jersey Mike Subs on the web and on all social media. A percentage of all proceeds is dedicated to the Special Operations Warrior Foundation.
Really, what you're going to see on the surface is the product. But as you go deeper, you're going to realize that there was a lot of thought and intention behind everything that we do. From the fabric selection to the design to the features. It drives me crazy when I see some of our competitors and it's like they just put a zipper on. They haven't even thought about why a zipper is in a certain place or why they picked a certain fabric.
Athleisure is one of the fastest growing and most competitive retail segments. The past few years have fundamentally shifted the way we think about our comfort and how we dress. For many of us, the days of suits and tight jeans have passed. I know they have for me. I want function, I want it to last, and I want it to look good. For this episode, I took the drive into Manhattan early on a Saturday. For me, this is the best time of day in the city. The sun's still coming up, and the city that never sleeps taking a power nap as it winds down from a late Friday and it preps for the summer tourists. I traveled to Fifth Avenue in the heart of the Flatiron District to sit down with Nate Checketts, co-founder and CEO of Rhone. In the center of their flagship store, Nate and I discussed Rhone and how he concepted it while working at the NFL. Nate explains Rhone's promise to help us move forever forward and the three pillars Rhone is grounded in: supreme comfort, luxury materials, and the pursuit of progress. Nate built the company on the mantra, we aren't just selling a product, we're selling a lifestyle. But to instill this in his team and to build brand loyalty, he shares the importance of intentionality, goals, standards, and holding ourselves accountable to metrics. Nate and Rhone are also unrelenting supporters of men's mental health, something I'm passionate about. We discuss reducing the stigmas around a man's ability to be open, vulnerable, and in need. Nate and I dig deep on the importance of being there for each other and accepting that it's okay to not be okay. After our recording, Nate invited me to attend Rhone's first Mind and Muscle event. 20 minutes of shared suffering, followed by an important discussion about our past and what has shaped us to be the men we are today. Take a listen on your favorite podcast platform. Watch the full video version of my conversation with Nate and the Mind and Muscle event on YouTube. Subscribe to us and follow at Jedburgh Podcast on all social media. Check out our website, jedburghpodcast.com. Learn more about Nate and Rhone at rhone.com. And follow them on social media at Rhone and at Nate Checketts. Nate, welcome to the Jedburgh podcast.
Thank you. This is awesome. It's great to be here.
It's awesome. This is the best time of day in New York City.
Yeah, nobody's here. I mean, they say the city never sleeps. The city definitely sleeps. And it's early, it's like 5 a.m. to 7 a.m. It's golden hours in New York.
That is the absolute best time.
Yeah.
It's a Saturday morning,
Yep.
and the heat has finally broken.
Yep.
So now the city still smells like trash, but it's not too bad.
Yeah.
Not as bad as it was a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
But this is absolutely
reduced humidity.
the best time.
Love it.
I was in preparation for this interview listening to an interview that you had with somebody else, and you said that you'll fight anybody who says this isn't the greatest city in the world.
Yeah, except for maybe you, because I know your background. I'm not sure I want to sign up to fight you.
No.
Yeah.
Well, because I think Boston's the greatest city in the world.
You know what? I was born in Boston, and I think I can say. I mean, the problem is New York sports dominated Boston sports for 100 years, except for the last 20.
Yeah. Well, and this year they're back to it because the Sox are just getting obliterated, so they're not even close. But it is awesome to be in New York. Thanks for coming down super early in the morning. But we have an event we're going to talk about after this, so we're going to get this conversation going. We're in the flagship store. We're on Fifth Avenue in Flatiron's district. This is amazing.
Yeah. No, it's honestly, I still pinch myself when I walk up on Fifth Avenue to have a store. The brand had been around for 6 or 7 years. We had like some really good moments, and I don't think my mom believed we had a real business until we opened a store on Fifth Avenue. And I was like, oh wait, Mom, you're actually now proud of me. We have a store on Fifth Avenue. That was the milestone. But it's It's a great location. It is our flagship. It's our biggest sales driver. We've got an amazing team here, really great people, and I love being in the heart of the city. So,
well, we have to give a special shout out to Sebastian, who came here. He beat me here. I was here right after 6:30. He was already here putting everything together. So special thanks to him. He's sitting back here off camera, but appreciate it.
Yeah, Sebastian's the best. We've got Brandon, our store manager. We've just got great people in our stores.
So Nate, serial entrepreneur, 4 companies by the age of 30. You had experience in some of the most iconic brands, the NFL. You've worked with Cisco. Sports Business Journal named you 40 under 40. You have a Glossy 50 nomination for leadership in fashion and beauty. Father to 3 boys. Chairman of the board at Beyond Type 1, where you support and advocate for those with type 1 diabetes. You've welcomed me to New Canaan, which I appreciate so much. And I've been telling a lot of people, you're just a good dude.
Oh, thanks, man.
Which is the most important thing.
I've fooled you for now. I mean, it's funny to hear somebody give your accomplishments to you because, in many ways it feels like, I still kind of I'm just getting started. There's still so much to do. It doesn't feel like I have something to fully be proud of yet. We're still, in the early innings of this.
Well, I'm going to ask you about all of it. How we got here, where you're going, what you're proud of to this day, and what we're going to be proud of as we watch this thing grow.
Yeah.
Let's start with Rhone. Started the company in 2014, and you said, our promise is to help you move forever forward. What does forever forward mean?
Well, part of my belief growing up is this idea that we can always get better, right? And as we age, especially I feel like as men, we're obsessed with competing with the guy next to us, right? In sports, you got to beat out the person next to you for the position. Mm-hmm. You're trying to beat the other team. And really, as you go through college and you come out of it, you realize that the person you're competing with is you yesterday. You know what I mean? And sometimes it's 3 steps forward, 1 step back. But that is kind of this whole philosophy is don't get caught up in the past. Don't get caught up in the future, but just keep kind of progressing. Just keep your eye on moving forward. And I don't know, it's been kind of a mantra for me. My lucky number is also 44. So there's kind of like this.
Why is that? Why 44?
This nice alliteration to it. It was my dad's basketball number in college, and he always used to talk about the Flying 44 brothers is what he called it. So I don't know. I just adopted it at an early age, and there's this forever forward. So when we came up with the concept, it just stuck, and now it's become a personal mission statement almost.
I like what you said about as we age, we always are. We get this competitive mindset, and competitive mindsets start when they're kids. I mean, you have 3 young boys. My son is 2, and he's already throwing things at me and yelling, "I won!" Yeah. It's the funniest thing, but it's like, okay, you're 2, and you're yelling that you won.
They're wired that way.
And I'm looking at them like, you didn't win. No, right? Yeah. It's like, okay, now I'm competing with a 2-year-old. Yeah,
I saw this great meme the other day. It's like, the feeling you get after you beat your 4-year-old in Blue's Clues. It's like, we're wired to be competitive. My dad, who is in his 60s, this was the greatest moment. So my mom came back from Walgreens or some grocery store with pool pong, and she had no idea what pool pong was. She's like, I got this game to play with the kids when we're traveling in the pool. I'm like, Mom, I do not want my kids playing this game. They have no idea what this is. But we did end up blowing it. And my dad was competing with my 10-year-old like it was the Super Bowl. I mean, I thought the stakes we do come a little wired that way.
Sometimes though, it's to a fault because as we get older, and we tend to become more competitive. What we actually need to be realizing is that these people we think we're competing with, actually, if we come together and support each other, will drive everybody further.
Yeah,
that's what resonated with me when I look at Rhone and when I look at this message.
Part of what motivated me around starting the company was this idea that men tend to isolate competition is an isolating activity. It draws us away from each other. We're not building or forging bonds. And, there's a beautiful line that's been attributed to multiple people. I don't know who said it, but the line lives by itself, which is, comparison is the thief of joy. And it's very hard to compete without comparing. And so what I've learned in my life is the ability to build off of each other and to build each other up and acknowledge that we might be in different places. If we were to go and do, a strength workout, you'd probably outperform me in a number of different. No, I'm sure. But there might be something that that for me is a strength, and learning how to acknowledge and appreciate each other's strengths is really what builds us up and motivates us. Can we be motivated by each other without being isolated by each other? And that idea of trying to take motivation without comparing, it's hard. Most of us tend to be happy on relative scales. Do I have more than my neighbor? Have I made more money than my brother? Have I achieved more success than my dad did? Whatever it is, that's how we tend to find satisfaction.
Yeah.
But learning how to find happiness on an absolute scale is, I think, a big challenge, which is, what am I trying to achieve for myself? Not what am I trying to achieve relative to someone else.
Yeah, we're going to talk about mental health here in a little bit, but I think that's one of the probably the foundational factors when we look at men and those who struggle with mental health, and all of us who struggle at times.
Yeah.
That I think that it comes back oftentimes to that. The company has 3 pillars that you operate under. At Rhone, also one of the mantras is that Rhone creates performance-inspired clothing for your active lifestyle. You've said, we aren't just selling a product, we're selling a lifestyle. I'm interested in understanding what that means and what is the difference between selling a product and selling a lifestyle. And then also these 3 pillars: supreme comfort, 1, 2, luxury materials, 3, pursuit of progress. And how does that tie into the vision for the company, and then how you're actually executing?
Yeah, well, a lot there. I'll try and unpack it. I'll try and unpack all of that. So, in terms of kind of the mission of the brand and being a brand more than just a product, is as I looked around at consumer companies that I really admired, we all tend to admire the same companies, right? It's the Apples, the Teslas of the world, these companies that have found a way to become iconic, and they're more than just their products. Certainly we love their products, and one of the reasons we love the brand is because we love the products. But whenever I see a brand that is like bestcomputers.com, you're like, there's nothing about that speaks to me. You are singularly reliant on having a product. And the brands that we tend to romanticize, the ones that we fall in love with, are brands that have a deeper, it's the same thing with people, right? When people are surface level deep, you can't really have a conversation with them. But the best people are the ones that you could be in a bunker with, right, for days. And you tend to just learn more about them. It's like peeling an onion. The truth is most people are like that. And so with a brand, we needed to create an iceberg type foundation where really what you're going to see on the surface is the product. But as you go deeper, you're going to realize that there was a lot of thought and intention behind everything that we do, from the fabric selection to the design to the features. It drives me crazy when I see some of our competitors, and it's like they just put a zipper on, they haven't even thought about why a zipper is in a certain place or why they picked a certain fabric, start throwing around terms. We spend so much time testing, doing abrasion testing, putting it on the best athletes in the world. Our team jokes around with me. I am like the hardest on the product of anybody. Like, they're like, how on earth did you rip a ripstop fabric? I'm like, I don't know. This is what I was doing. I was building a treehouse with my kids. I put on a tool belt. I was going up and down the ladder. They're like, well, how many of our customers are actually going to do that? I'm like,
people are going to do that.
At least one.
Yeah.
Like, I did it. Why? It's got to be good enough to hold up to those kinds of standards. So anyways, when I think about building a brand and a lifestyle, what we're trying to do is we're trying to equip people to live the way that people live now. And that means coming out of the pandemic, right? I just believe that our guy is all in on everything, right? Like he wants to work hard. He wants to play hard with his family. He wants to really enjoy his hobbies. He's going to work out as hard as he can. He's going to end up, like suffering on a mat this morning, and then he's going to get himself up and he's going to go to work. And
nowadays it might not even change.
Yeah. Now you might just be wearing the same
roll into the other room,
same clothes. And so this idea about building really versatile, really durable, high quality clothing was kind of the motivation. And truthfully, like, yeah, we can create a product video and be like, here's this zipper, here's this fabric, here's this waistband. In the right context, that works well. But to build something that has longevity, we've got to help people understand the broader mission and the broader lifestyle that we're trying to give. And so when you get back to these 3 brand pillars that you brought out, obviously from a product standpoint, great materials, supreme comfort, all of those different things. But on the brand, we've got to be more than that. Otherwise, there's not really plenty of people make good product. There's not a reason for us to live if all we do is make good product.
I'm gonna plug the product here now because I'm in the Mako shorts.
I appreciate that.
And I appreciate you sending them to me. Yeah. But I wear them all the time. I love them.
So let me just take that as an example. The Mako short, which I don't even think half our customers know this. The Mako short is named after the Mako shark, which
it's a boat brand, Mako too.
Yeah. So the Mako shark is the fish from The Old Man and the Sea, which was written by Ernest Hemingway, one of my brothers, who's our creative director, favorite authors. We always go every year in Sun Valley, Ketchum, Idaho, to the Hemingway Memorial, and it's just one of his favorite books. And so we were like, how do we honor Hemingway in our product? And he was like, well, what if we name it the Mako after The Old Man and the Sea? I'm like, literally 0 people are going to get that reference, like no one. He's like, but you and I will know that we took the time to talk about it and think about it. And he like has all these literary references to it. And so like, I feel like if we can put that, a lot of things get manufactured in a lab these days. The amount of big brands that are like, hey, we just launched our like Rhone ripoff, and they don't even change the names of the products. Like when we launched the commuter pant, there was no other commuter pant in the market. Now, almost every single brand in our space has a quote unquote commuter pant, but there was a big reason why we named it that, because we grew up in the suburbs of Connecticut, and like 70% of the towns commute into New York on Metro North.
Yep.
So anyways, I just think there's something about being really intentional, really thoughtful about how you create everything, and how you this whole phrase of how you do anything is how you do everything. That to me is what is behind the brand that flows into the product.
It shows. So word on the street is that
word on the street. Word on the streets of New Canaan.
Yeah, big bad New Canaan.
Yeah,
is that you concepted Rhone while you were working at the NFL. NFL, great brand, but you were unhappy. I identify with this, and I tell the story often. When I came to New York, I went to NYU for my MBA. I worked at Merrill Lynch. Phenomenal organization.
Yeah.
Absolutely loved the people.
Right.
Every day I woke up, I lived here at 34th and Lexington, and I was like, I can't do this anymore.
Right. But meanwhile, you must have had 1,000 friends who were like, wow, you've made it. You figured it out.
Every day.
Yeah.
Every day.
Yeah.
And every day I'm laying in my bed going, oh, man, no.
Yeah.
What was going on at the NFL for you, and how did that lead you into this vision for Rhone?
Yeah. Well, my father had worked in sports, and I have 3 brothers. And I would say out of the 4 boys, I was the one who was least interested in working in professional sports. I think I have 2 brothers that did a stint at ESPN. I've got an older brother who does sports talk radio, leading show in Utah. He's amazingly talented. And I was kind of always more interested in going down this tech side or doing something disruptive or different. But I had built...
Which is far different than manufacturing clothing.
Yeah. We'll get into how this whole wild, crazy journey started. But I had built this mobile software company that we ended up selling to the San Francisco 49ers as they were building their new stadium. And that led me to a conversation with a head guy at the NFL. And he said, you have an interesting background, in tech and sports, and brought me into the NFL. And I was basically running the sponsorship strategy side of the business. And it was a dream job in many ways, like,
Absolutely.
a chance to work in the quote unquote family business.
And you were young.
And I was young, and it was a big role, big responsibility. I got brought back east. I had to work on some amazing projects, like moving the combine and the draft around to extend the NFL calendar. Helped launch some amazing sponsorship deals. Worked on the sideline deal. Completely transformed we had a goal internally to double our sponsorship revenue in a short period of time. So it was a lot of really great things. And you walk into the NFL offices, and I'm not kidding you, there's AstroTurf on the ground. There are TVs every 5 feet playing football. And football was my favorite sport, is my favorite sport, has always been my favorite sport. And I was just confused. I'm like, I'm unhappy. And I don't want to admit it to myself, but I know, it's like I knew I wasn't doing my life's work, my passion.
Your purpose.
I couldn't figure out why. And I was so tortured by it, but I had this like really rocky road as an entrepreneur. It's a nice tagline to say you started 4 companies before the age of 30. What I don't talk enough about is like how hard that was, how many failures I had along that path. And the thought of doing another startup scared the daylights out of my wife. And I was sitting there because I'm like, all right, I have a 401k, I have a stable salary. The NFL is not known for like overpaying people, but I was compensated, and I was putting money away for retirement. I had 2 sons, and then as I was going in and out of the train, I was one of the 60-70% in Fairfield County. I was commuting into the city.
Not in commuter pants.
Not in commuter pants. I was wearing a suit and tie every day because that was the requirement, which was probably another thing that made me unhappy. Let's be honest.
Now you see people in a suit and a tie, you're like, what are you doing?
Yeah, what is wrong with you? You don't like yourself. But I remember I tried to use that time, that space, commuting into the city for, I called it the great equalizer. Like if I needed more sleep, I would rest. If I needed more time for, reading or journaling. But that's usually what I ended up doing, is like reading personal books to try and like further my self-development. And I remember sitting there and I was kind of like pondering this piece of why am I unhappy? And I got to say, like, just as like a little interlude, and you could be like, you're the most long-winded human I know. But I don't think that we give ourselves enough time to just think, right? We consume so much content. It's podcasts, it's audiobooks, it's news, it's all the time. And so we have underdeveloped like pondering muscles. Yeah. I don't know what muscle or, part of the brain that is.
This is really important. So it had to be like 2015. And I know what it was. It was in 2015. I was the aide to the 2-star General Jim Linder, who ran Special Operations Command Africa. He was replaced at the end of his tenure by a guy named General Don Bulldog, and so a 1-star general. And he was giving a talk once that I was listening to, and he said this very thing. He said, leaders need time to think. And I was a young officer, and I was listening to him, and I'm like, that's stupid.
Yeah.
What are you talking about? Leaders need time to think. Like, supposed to be making decisions and, people ingesting information.
Right.
Over the years, as you gain maturity, you start to realize that what you said and what he said is 100% accurate. Yeah. And then if you think about when you go for a run or you go and work out, I can go for a run for 30 minutes and feel like I solved the world's problems.
Yeah.
Because totally. I'm away from everything else.
Yeah, I feel like the best insights in my life have generally been informed by listening to great content, right? Like hearing a book or a podcast, but they come in between the pages, so to speak. And it's like my own thoughts that have interpreted them and then, kind of given me this insight directly applied to my life. So I'm sitting there in quiet, no music, nothing, just me and my thoughts and a journal. And I remember writing down in there, I'm basically discussing why I'm unhappy and like struggling with it because I don't want to disappoint my wife. I don't want to go back and do another startup and like scare her. And, but I realized I'm like, what I want to do is I want to build a brand that matters, that does something positive in the world. And then I immediately wrote underneath, like, that doesn't mean cure cancer, but it's something that adds value into people's lives. And as soon as I wrote that down, it was like the universe just synced for me. Yeah. And I knew what I wanted to do because I admire people that are like, I want to be a doctor. I want to be a musician. I want to go to law school, whatever it is. There are people who know the industry they want to work in. And for me, I was never attracted to a single industry. I was more attracted to an idea or a concept or more a business stage than I was to an industry. Mm-hmm. And so in that moment, I knew, okay, I want to start something. I want to build a brand that has meaning and value beyond the product that it sells. And so then my ears and antenna were up. And the cool thing about the NFL and where I was is I had exposure to the best consumer brands in the world. I got to see all of these consumer brands. We were pitching them. We were building decks. Here's why you should work with the NFL. And, even though the ultimate pitch was like, if you put the NFL logo next to your logo, you're going to sell more product.
Right.
I was obsessed with like telling these like strategy stories of why, there was all this increased brand value by laddering off of a great brand like the NFL and who our customer was. So while I'm there, one of our partners at the league, Budweiser, sends a box of Lululemon gear to the office. And I had just received a pair of Lululemon sweatpants for Christmas from my mother. And my brother-in-law was like, I'm never wearing this. This is a women's yoga brand. I can't wear this. And so I was like kind of, and I remember just being like, you're ridiculous. You're such a prima donna. I tell him,
these are nice pants.
Yeah, I'm like, these are very expensive. These are expensive pants. Like, of course I'm wearing these. And so Budweiser sends this box of Lululemon for the women in the office, and they send a box of Nike for the men in the office. And I'm like, hey, this is weird. They make men's stuff. Mm-hmm. And the guy sitting in the cubicle next to me turns to me and he's like, well, yeah, but do you buy your underwear at Victoria's Secret? And I was like, dude, what, there's clearly like some stigma here. And so I remember I had access to all of this analysis on industry. And I started looking at the active apparel industry, and I saw these two big buckets, right? There was, on the one hand, all of these mass distributed brands, Nike, Reebok, Adidas, Under Armour, that had similar gender mixes in terms of the product that they sold. And 80% of the product was distributed to someone else, through someone else, right? A Dick's Sporting Goods or Amazon or whatever. Right. And then you had all of these female-focused brands that were selling 80+% distributed directly to the customer, their retail stores, .com, and at a price premium to all these mass wholesale distributed brands, which means, but they had similar margin profiles, which means that they were putting so much more into the product. And I was like, why isn't there a men's brand doing that? Mm-hmm. It just makes sense. And then I became kind of so obsessed with this idea of like, well, this should happen. I started talking to my brother-in-law. We talked a lot about it. And honestly, it wasn't until I came home and I was looking at my two sons, thinking about growing up in a family of 4 boys. And I was like, man alive, these kids are growing up in a very complicated, different world when it comes to masculinity, their role. If we were to build a men's brand, we would have to stand for how to help these young men and men today understand, their role in society, how to live, how to give back, how to engage in tricky and difficult conversations around gender identity and all of those different topics. and really help inspire men to be at their best, because we know that our society functions. We can't isolate any one gender.
Right.
And it felt like that was starting to happen. We'll talk about mental health and men's mental health, but that was kind of the genesis for me, is like, that's when I got really excited about building Rhone.
Well, I want to throw out some things here, because you went down this road, and we have the term athleisure generally for the industry. But this is a tremendously competitive industry, and as you mentioned, Lululemon's there. Alo has now launched, or Alo, or
Alo,
my
yeah.
wife corrects me all the time. So sorry, Alo. It's Alo. I got it. Now I won't forget it. 10,000's a little bit more of a tactical brand, but they're out there. And then you have, as you mentioned, Nike and Reebok, and even like Patagonia, which has moved into a little bit of this space. I was doing research on this very early this morning and found the 37 best men's athleisure brands. Yep. So if we have a list of 37 best, there's hundreds in this space. The market is expected to grow from $411 billion in 2021 to just under $800 billion by 2028, and that's a combined annual growth rate of almost 10% over the next 7 or 8 years. North America being the largest market, especially here in the U.S. Why is I say that now, and now I'm gonna ask you, and you've covered a lot of it, but what differentiates Rhone from these others?
Yeah. Well, look, when we started, we did feel like we had this kind of first mover advantage, and there had been a lot of copycats, from logo reproductions to using the same models to going after ambassadors that we had once worked with. It's like the idea of original thought has just been completely lost, and I'm so driven by original thought that, like, when I see somebody else doing it, I'm like, we don't want to do that anymore.
Yeah, that's how I am.
But what I would say is that a lot of these companies, I think, tend to be more product level deep. And as we've spent a lot of time talking about, I feel like the customer really appreciates and starts to understand the intentionality and the thought process that goes into things. And sometimes you can't put your finger on it, but Apple's a great example of this. You get a product and you're like, wow, they really did think about all of these different use cases. They really spent time to think about how this product would better my life. And so many times when I wear a product, or especially when I used to, I'm like, why didn't they put a zipper here? Or why did they, like, this is a terrible drawstring. This drawstring pulls too much or doesn't pull enough, or so thinking through all of those different aspects was really important to us. And then I think the other thing that really separates Rhone is we have what we call a full closet solution, which means that from underwear to outerwear, we have you covered using the best fabrics and best materials. And I would put our stuff up against anybody. I mean, I think we make the absolute best dress shirt in the world, which is crazy for a brand that's only been around for 7 years, but not very many people use an Italian fabric. The only other company that uses the same fabric than us charges 550 euros for their shirt.
Wow.
Ours is 128.
Yeah.
You never need to dry clean it. It's, it'll pay for itself in 10 wears. But
show me where that is before I walk out.
It's it's right here in the background. It's you put that on, it ruins every other dress shirt for you. But so there's, I just feel like there's certainly a lot that separates us from the competition. But the main thing that will separate us is there's always going to be copycats in the industry. Apple used to put these banners up whenever they launched a new product that said, turn on the photocopy machines in Seattle, with a nod to Microsoft. I don't want to be the brand that is saying, hey, let's take that and make that exact same thing.
Yeah.
We were certainly inspired by the giants of the industry, but we've never tried to make things just like they did. We want to make things that in a way that's perfect for our customer.
You've talked a lot about quality. I told you that when we had this conversation, I was going to throw out these 5 special operation forces truths, okay, and values. We call them values. Rhone is working with special operations units and operators and fielding some stuff out to them. And you've called that, one of the ultimate endorsements and tests of the brand. And I can tell you that certainly, if you want somebody to put this
stuff
apparel
to the test,
through a test, just give it to a couple of guys I know, and they will tell you everything.
Yeah.
And they'll be brutally honest about it too. But we talked about these 5 special operations forces truths. 1, humans are more important than hardware. 2, quality is better than quantity. 3, special operations forces cannot be mass produced. 4, competent special operations forces cannot be created after emergencies occur. And 5, most special operations require non-SOF assistance. All of these we can apply to business.
Sure.
And I give entire talks about how to apply these to different businesses and why they're important and how they set a foundation for success of your team, your individuals, and how you build upon them for sustainability. But number 2 is quality is better than quantity. And what does that mean? It means that can we do more with less? If we focus on doing it right to the highest standard, and we're not just throwing stuff out there to throw it out, we're not throwing bodies at the problem. We're not throwing, in this case, low grade materials at it just to see how we can do. We're really thinking with that. You mentioned intentionality. We were introduced by BJ Nadel, Jason McCarthy from Go Ruck's
love
partner.
that guy.
And awesome. I mean, you came up while I'm sitting in Jacksonville at Sandlot Jack's speaking with him, and he joined me on I think it was episode 59, which was the Sandlot Jack's episode, and we're in the back of this World War II Land Rover, which was used as an ambulance in World War II by the British military. Wow. And he's asking me, do you know Nate? I'm like, no, I don't. And he's like, okay, I'm going to introduce you. And within like 10 minutes, he had the email going. But what they talk about with quality, and what Jason talks about, how everything had to stand the test of Jason.
Yeah.
And they, very similar to what you said. It reminds me a lot about that, because he was dragging it through everything and going back, and the team was getting frustrated with him and saying, what?
Why? You're the only one who would ever do this. Yeah.
And he's saying, well, if I did it, someone else is going to do it, and they're going to do something I didn't think about. You said you had a sensitivity to clothing. And you also said you shared it a bit with your sons, but there's this commitment to quality, and it's about getting it right or keep redoing it. It has to be perfect. Can you talk about that sensitivity, and how has that permeated the culture of the organization? Because you mentioned culture at the beginning as one of those sustainable efforts that keeps a company and allows a company to grow and sustain over the long term. But how does that attitude that you have as the co-founder, as the CEO, how does that spread to absolutely everybody?
Yeah, gosh. Well, I
another
think,
loaded one for you.
Yeah, I think just talking about the quality piece for a second. If you think about, imagine for a second, maybe this never happens in your house. It doesn't often happen in our house, but imagine everything in your closet is washed and clean and hanging or folded in a drawer. Do you tend to grab the same thing first out of your closet?
Every single time.
Every single time.
I have to stop myself and be like, why do you always grab the same thing?
Yeah, because you have favorites, right? And it's like, I hear from people all the time. They're like, why would I ever spend $68 on a pair of workout shorts when I can get 3 shorts from Nike? I'm like, because if I give you one of our shorts, it's going to be the first thing out of your closet every single time. By the way, it's going to outlast those other 3 shorts. You hear about companies like these fast fashion companies talking about sustainability right now, and it drives me crazy, because their stuff is only meant to last for 20 to 30 washes. It's meant
That's like nothing.
It's meant to break down over time. It's like it's planned atrophication. And I'm like, how long could something of ours last? There's this whole new space called re-commerce, which is reselling existing products, and it only works for companies like a Rhone or a Patagonia, or stuff that is really made to last over a long period of time. So I think I'd rather have 5 amazing shirts in my closet than 30 terrible, mediocre shirts that I never even want to wear. Yeah. And so
with the neck that goes.
Yeah, it starts wringing out, and it smells bad. I mean, that was the whole a whole other piece about the dirty part of our industry when I started looking at it. Most activewear, which is made from polyester adheres to what, when you sweat, this is gross, but it's not news for a lot of people.
It's reality.
Yeah. When you sweat, you basically, your skin starts flaking, right? And that is where the odor comes from, because polyester will adhere to this, this odor that's coming off of your skin. And so what they do is they treat garments with these pesticides to make sure that it doesn't adhere, it doesn't bond. But it's a topical spray, and every time you wash your garment, it gets worse and worse and less likely to prevent it from adhering to sweat. That's why if you've had from one of these mass brands something for more than 15, the life cycle that it has to last for is 20 washes. I remember hearing that. I'm like, that's like a week for me. It's not the 20 washes. I never buy something to be like, hey, I'm only going to have this for 20 washes. So we infuse gold and silver particles into the fiber of our garment. After 100 washes, it's still 98% effective against odor. But it's that kind of stuff that I feel like quality over quantity, which is something I absolutely believe in, makes a difference. In terms of how that feeds into our culture, and you talked about the sensitivity piece, my sons, almost without fail, all of them are really sensitive about hang tags in the back of their shirt, or if the fibers of the shirt are a little bit itchy. My 13-year-old can now wear Rhone, and it's hilarious to watch him. He's like, Dad, this is so much better than everything else I've been able to wear. But I don't know. I think,
yes, that's what I'm doing all day. What do you think's going on?
Yeah, exactly. But I was kind of that way too. I don't know. It was like I was uncomfortable in my own skin, and there's lots of reasons why that might be the case. Probably probably some condition, but the team will always be like, is this soft enough for Nate? And I'm like, I don't want to be the one that's most sensitive, but the truth is no, this waistband is not soft enough. We've got to figure out how to get it softer, because I know I'm not the only person who is like this. And it's hard to get things soft and comfortable and really, really durable, but that's kind of what we talk about. And then, there's a whole cultural aspect in terms of how we build our team, how we hire people. And it's really hard. It's really hard to build a company and, go from a couple of people in a room. And now we have over 100 people that work for us. And, that is probably where I spend 80% of my time is on the people inside our company.
Yeah. Well, that's soft truth number one. Yeah. Humans are more important than hardware.
Totally.
We get fixated on technology. We can get fixated on the product. But at the end of the day, someone has to create that product. They have to visualize it. They have to go through all the steps, all the details, all the testing, everything you said, all comes down to the quality of the people that you have. And do those people take the ownership that you have, right, and invest themselves into meeting this quality day in and day out?
Yeah. I mean, look, there's no question, and I spent a lot of time. I sat on the board of a company that's now public that considers themselves to be the largest cognitive media platform in the world. And so I went down this deep AI, artificial intelligence kind of binge in terms of trying to understand the way that computers are going to inform our future. And the truth is that, in many cases, these machines are better equipped to do certain tasks for us, right? Especially when it's hey, take hindsight information, organize it, deduplicate anything in there, and then give us a prediction based on what's happened in the past. But where computers really suck is in saying, hey, take some inspiration, take some creativity, blend that with that historical information, and now make a prediction.
Right.
And by the way, that's almost everything in life. We can get some weather thought patterns but having the most advanced machinery or computer systems in the world, it's also meaningless without that human connection. And I don't know about you, but I like to be surprised. And computers aren't great at surprising you.
Go watch Top Gun.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
I mean, that's it. That's the whole
How
movie.
good was that
right?
movie? I mean, we could do a whole podcast on that movie.
So fired up.
Yeah.
Like, I was shaking.
I think
before
I had
started.
low expectations because I was like, oh gosh, another nostalgia remake, like sequel. And I left, I'm like, that might have been the greatest sequel ever made.
Well, they owned it.
Yeah.
They
Oh,
owned
totally.
every part of like, hey, we're kind of like sort of remaking the same movie a little
Yeah.
bit with a different spin, and we're going to bring back all these like key highlights, and we're just going to own it. We're not going to try to fake it or
Yeah.
make it seem like
So
you know,
good.
real. I loved it. I loved every second of it. Rhone weathered the COVID storm very well. And much of the industry did, because everybody kind of made this transition that we've been talking and joking about. I mean, I never wear jeans. I never put pants on anymore. And actually, I put one of my notes over here that I was going to ask you about, and maybe it'll come up. And the question was, why is bottom wear the fastest growing segment within the industry?
Yeah.
Right? But this is important because you focus the company on one of those pillars, the pursuit, what the customer needed, what was really driving them now in this, as everybody had to become adaptable and they had to change. During this time, you also led Brands Buy Better, a coalition of 140 brands that came together to generate funds for COVID-19 relief, raised almost $4 million, just under $4 million. We're staring down the barrel of a potential recession, market pullback. Depending on who you talk to, they'll give you a different opinion. So we won't argue that. But inflation is, some of the highest levels, high prices on high prices on, on the things we need to survive.
Yep.
Right. Fuel, food. Discretionary spending is expected to dry up. Now, certainly we can argue that clothing is not really a discretionary spending. We need it, but you can choose now where you go. What's your outlook over the next 12 to 24 months on the luxury goods market? How are you thinking about the company, and how are you thinking about potential to have to pivot and be adaptable? One of those 9 characteristics we talk about a lot on the podcast.
Yeah, well, I actually have a fairly optimistic view as it relates to our customer base. I mean, we certainly do skew to a higher household income, people who are willing to invest in quality. And what's been interesting is in watching the market, how it's unfolded. I mean, if you look at the data, discretionary spending is already down. And what happens is people tend to trade down in recessionary environments, which means at all levels. So I don't know that I would put us in the luxury category. We certainly consider ourselves in the premium category. We use luxury materials and fabrics. But our customer might be making different decisions about real estate or vehicle purchases or more expensive decisions, but they haven't really shifted their decision making on investing in high quality product. The types of product they're buying from us has shifted. Mm-hmm. During the early stage of the pandemic, it was like we couldn't have enough sweatpants and shorts in stock. It was just you're talking about the. What was funny is typically in the apparel industry, tops sell 2 to 1 to bottoms. Not the case in the pandemic. The amount of like shorts and sweatpants that we sold were. But now what people are buying from us is they're going back to the office in some cases, or they're going they're kind of returning in some cases to a more normal silhouette, but they don't want to wear like scratchy cotton Docker type pants or suit pants or cotton dress shirts. They want to wear technical fabrics with stretch and comfort because they got used to doing that for 2 years. And so our commuter collection, we can't even keep it in stock. Like the amount of reorders we're having to do on our dress shirts and our pants has been really, really high right now. That's going to normalize at some point. And so over the next, specifically as it relates to Rhone, I'm really optimistic. The one thing that I do think has shifted for consumer brands is a need to breathe your own oxygen. And in theory, this should have always been the case. But because of probably irresponsible levels of investing and inflated valuations of companies, I mean, money just being thrown at companies with no rhyme or reason, and companies should never really be worth that. You saw some pretty irresponsible spending. I have competitors right now opening leases where they're paying above the asking price just because they're sitting on cash.
Right.
We're trying not to do that. We're trying to be really responsible. There are companies in our space that are losing $40 million a year. Wow. We don't do that. We tend to say we've got to make money. We've got to be profitable. We've got to build a responsible, long-term, sustainable business that isn't consistently relying on investor dollars. And so that was the biggest fundamental focus for us over the last 18 months.
Well, you had a good mentor growing up, and I want to ask you a little bit about that, because you said something. The reason why I bring it up, because you said something that I felt was very impactful in a speech that you gave, and you said you come from a place where much is given, much is required and expected. And I think that's really important. As you raise 3 boys, I have 2 now with 1 on the way, and it shifts your whole perspective. And we think about our parents and how they raised us and the values that they instilled in us. And I often ask myself, and I'll hear different ways people parent and look at my wife and be like, we don't do that. Should we be doing that? I don't know. Are we doing it right? Are kids going to be all messed up when they grow up? I have no idea.
It's hard.
But your dad was an instrumental figure for you, for your siblings, and in professional sports. Youngest CEO and GM in NBA history at age 28, president of the Knicks, later MSG, instrumental in the founding of the WNBA, the MLS, but father to 6.
Yeah.
What do you take away from that leadership and that mentorship, and how did it shape you?
I mean, for me, it's been everything. And part of one of the reasons why I believe so much in investing in the men in this country and trying to help them be at their best, because a great father figure, what it can do for a family, for children, that it's just impossible to fully explain. I didn't have any idea growing up how impressive my dad was to the outside world for a long time. I remember we were going into the city one morning. We had to get church clothes on, is what we called them. And it was a Saturday.
We don't wear those anymore.
Yeah, yeah, not very often. It was a Saturday, and we had to get church clothes on. And we're like, Mom, we're not going to church. It's Saturday. And my mom said, we're going into the city because your dad's receiving an award. And we're like, my brother Ben, who was probably, 7 at the time, he said, what award is he getting? And my mom goes, he's receiving the Father of the Year award. And Ben looks at me, and then he looks at my mom, and he goes, Mom, why are we really going into the city? And so we didn't fully appreciate how unique it was. It's what we knew. But as I've grown and as I've seen other people's parenting and experiences, the only mistake people make in terms of giving my dad credit is they don't give my mom enough credit, because without them, I would be nowhere. And I remember somebody saying something along the lines to me of like, no matter what you accomplish in life, everybody's always going to give your dad the credit. That must be really hard for you. And I was like, it's not hard at all. Like they deserve all of the credit. If I do anything good, they should. I get that I was so lucky and so blessed, and trying to acknowledge anything else would just be like insanity. Right? I mean, I would have no ability to do what I'm doing today. Forget the economic advantages, forget the relationship advantages. The lessons they taught me, I could not function as a leader without the principles that they instilled upon me. And there is some truth, I can't remember exactly how the adage goes, but it's like, my father drove a, Model A, I drive a, whatever, my son's going to drive a Mercedes, my grandson's going to drive a Lamborghini, and his son's going to go back to driving, like a bicycle. Right. And there's this idea of wealth cycles and what happens. And my grandfather sold mobile homes, and my dad grew up with almost nothing economically. He came from relatively impoverished circumstances, great parents, but didn't really have much. And so I think he was hyper focused on this as a parent. We had 4 to 6 hours of Saturday jobs every single weekend.
I am going to institute at my house.
Yeah, it was. This was not a joke. Like I tell people this, they're like, no. And I think my sister somehow escaped with like a lot less than we did, but he was really tough on his boys in terms of, I want you to learn how to work. Mm-hmm. And he would say that to us all the time. By the way, he wasn't just like, go mow the lawn. He was out there with us. Right. He was pulling weeds. Like he could have easily hired a landscaping crew and we lived on 4 acres. Like this was not like go mow the front little lawn. It was a lot of work. And I remember my friends in New Canaan. We moved to New Canaan when I was 8 years old. 6 kids. We stuck out like a sore thumb. Everybody, it was like, which country club did you belong to? Do you belong to the New Canaan Country Club or do you belong to the Field Club? And I was like, I don't know what a country club is.
Right.
I like that. And they were like, well, what's your handicap in golf? I'm like, I don't know how to play golf. I mean, we didn't fit in as a family at all. And when people would be like, hey, do you want to come over Saturday morning? I'm like, I got to finish my Saturday chores. They're like, what are you like churning butter at your house? But now looking, and I hated it. I hated all of it. I was like, this is so unfair. And Tommy gets $20 from his mom and from his dad for allowance every week. And like, you guys make us take homemade lunch in a sack. And like, why can't we buy lunch at school? And how come I have to do Saturday chores? Like I fought at every step of the way. And slowly over time, I mean, that's the hardest thing about parenting is to realize like your kids really, you do have to like listen to them in some cases, but you also just have to play the long game. Like trying to get your kid to learn the piano, they're going to complain every single day for probably years, but at least months, depending on the stubbornness of the child.
I complained for years when I played the piano.
Yeah, but it's like the consistency, and eventually they're going to turn back and be like, thank you so much. And so I feel like, from the time I was 17, it's just been like, I could never pay them back. They mean everything to me. They're still the most, important people to me. And I rely on my dad, every time I face a personal or a professional problem. The advantage I have to be able to pick up the phone and call him, that he didn't have his dad died at a young age. I try not to take that for granted.
Yeah. The big thing in my house is for my 12-year-old, you don't even know. Like, and I have to sit there. And at first, you become like viscerally upset.
Yeah.
And then it's like, okay, just like you said, take a deep breath. Yep. You'll see.
Yeah.
You'll see.
Yeah. It is hard. It's hard to navigate some of those waters. But yeah, I mean, you try and I remember as a kid being like, I'm never going to forget what it's like to feel like a teenager. But you do. You forget. You forget all the pressure and the stress and the different things. And yeah, I have a teenager now, and watching him go through it, it's a different challenge.
It's horrible.
Yeah.
It's absolutely horrible.
You also have a teenage daughter, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
She'll be 13 in November. So yes, we're there. When we get done here in a few minutes, we're going to partake in Rhone's Mind and Muscle event. You've been a vocal advocate for men's mental health. I'll say stalking your Instagram, where you've created this mental health minute, which actually is pretty good. You're not giving yourself enough credit.
I like that it was actually pretty good. You were surprised. This is good. I went in with really low expectations, and it wasn't bad. So
your first one, you were self-deprecating. And
yeah,
I was like, no, this is good. Like, I'm
a good job. I'm just not a social media guy,
I hate it. That's why I have Jenny. Jenny's over here laughing off to the side.
We all need a Jenny. I need somebody to help me with my social media.
But Rhone also hosted the Men's Wellness Summit in conjunction with Men's Health and Every Man a few weeks ago back in June. We have focused a lot of our conversations and a lot of our episodes on mental health. How do we reduce stigmas? How do we improve our habits? How do we be there for each other? Big phrase that I use a lot is it's okay to not be okay.
Totally.
And we as men specifically often think that, I've got to keep it to myself. I have to hide it. I don't want people
Cannot
to
show
know.
any weakness. Right?
Why is mental health so important to you? Why is it so important to the Rhone mission? And how are you moving the needle forward on reducing the stigma?
Yeah. Well, a couple of sobering stats that I try and think about every single day. And this is a tricky topic to talk about because there's actually some research that shows that giving a lot of attention to this, normalizes the behavior and therefore, might increase bad decisions. And so, first and most importantly, if you are struggling, or anyone listening to this is struggling with their own mental health, the best thing you can do is to start to talk about it with someone. And ideally, that would be somebody that you really trust and will have your best interest in heart, certainly a friend, a therapist. But the worst thing you can do is to not talk about it. So I want to start there because I really always go back to that point. But there are some sobering stats. Men commit suicide at almost 4 times the rate of women. Suicide is one of the leading causes of death for men between the ages of 15 and 35. It is an unbelievable problem. And when we talk about disease, heart disease, diabetes, all of these different things that are hurting us, we simply cannot talk enough about mental health. And what's been great is it has become a bigger time and attention. And people will say, well, women need mental health resources too. Absolutely. Yep. But our role as a brand, we sell men's product. And unfortunately, this is a more serious issue right now in our time in history with men. And I think it's for a lot of the reasons that you outlined. Society raises us to have a tough exterior. We don't want to show weakness. All the stigmas around men not wanting to ask for directions, it's all true. It's at least generally true. It might not be true to every single individual, but generally it is true. And the stats around veterans is really sobering. Yeah. And I got involved in an organization called FitOps a few years ago.
Yeah, I know that.
And we launched this whole Superman challenge, to help people realize that they don't have to be superheroes, that they can that they can give back, that they can find rehabilitation. And as I've talked to friends who have served, and as I've my grandfather was a Marine. And I've thought a lot about this. There's something, I think, about going and doing such meaningful work, feeling like your country relies on you, your family relies on you. People look to you as a hero when you're still maturing, you're still in this maturation cycle. And then you come back. And even if you have a good job, you work in finance or you work at it, the level of meaning is just different. And it's hard, and so you want to find that same level of meaning that you had, and so instead of doing something that's not as meaningful, you end up doing nothing, and you end up sitting in isolation so much that it leads to all kinds of negative results. And so the reason I care about this is, 1, it is a massive problem, and 2, because I do feel like talking about it makes a difference. And the biggest thing that I don't feel like people really understand is that mental health shouldn't only be talked about when it's a problem, right? We talk a lot now, thankfully, when it comes to physical health. Our country is the leading by far in terms of prescription drugs. Mm-hmm. We're great. We're the best in the world at dealing with a problem once it's come up. You've got a heart attack, you've got a disease, we can put a stent in, we can give you this medication. We're great at it. What we suck at is preventative medicine. Right. There are 100 countries ahead of us when it comes to preventative medicine, the nutrition levels, the treatments of it, and mental health is similar. The way we talk about mental health is immediately we do jump to things like suicide, depression, anxiety, but mental health is for everyone. It's for people who have never struggled with those things, because the truth is that mental health should be viewed as developing a tool belt for when things get hard, because all of us will go through trials and challenges and difficulty. And so this isn't about reaching some Zen-like state where we're all going to be Buddhist monks and sitting there and finding true inner peace. I don't think most people are going to ever achieve that. I admire the people who have done that. But for me, it's about knowing how to slow my mind, how to calm down the negative thoughts, the downward spirals. My mom has this phrase called the dreaded what ifs. What if something happens to my children? What if something happens to me? What if I slip and make a mistake? And all of this anxiety that these feelings can create. I have spent a lot of time trying to focus on my mental health every single day so that I'm prepared for when something might go wrong. Similar to with your physical health, you can't prevent heart disease with one workout, but consistently moving your body, consistently eating nutritious foods will reduce the risk that will happen to you. You can't prevent suicide by writing in your journal one time. You can't prevent anxiety from happening in your life completely, but you can improve your resilience by doing things like cold exposure therapy, having a social circle and a social safety net so when you have a challenging time, developing the ability to talk to yourself when things are hard. We just don't talk enough about the tool set. Yeah. And so what I've started to try and do on my social channel, because, even though I make fun of the fact that social media is basically a bunch of kids with their cell phones, taking pictures of themselves, it's the most self-indulgent thing that really exists in our society. I also try and remind myself, I have the ability to take my phone at any point in time and reach thousands of people. Mm-hmm. If I was in front of an audience and there were a few thousand people, if there were 500 people, I would take it very seriously how I prepare, what I communicate. And so I've tried to take that point of view, and I hope it's making a difference and an impact.
Yeah, well, that impact is important. I mean, and if we can, I say all the time, even through this podcast, if we can impact one person. Yeah. And with specific to mental health, we did an episode on Sailhead. Jenny's brother started Sailhead. She's involved. I'm involved. As an organization that's very important for us in healing veterans through teaching them how to sail. And if our goal is to save one, if we can save one, that's where we got to start. And
you think about the ripple effect of that. Mm-hmm. You save one veteran, and this is a future father, a future grandfather, a future person in the workforce, and the ripple effect that I think about the people that helped my grandfather and my my relatives through the years, wouldn't be here without that. Yeah.
I want to ask you about goals and standards. I told you there would be a test question at the end. This is kind of it. So you talked about goal setting, you talk about goal monitoring, and you said that we all set goals, but how do we track our progress? I would take that thought process actually a step further, and I would talk about the process and loving the process, loving the journey. We've had a number of conversations on the podcast about it, but the concept for me comes down to creating standards versus setting goals. And if we set goals, they're out there. And then often what happens when we set goals is we become fixated on the goal. Yep. And then everything becomes a chore. Every day we wake up and it's I got to do this to achieve this goal. I got to do this. Yeah. So this ties into your comments about intentionality. Yep. Are we intentional about what we do? I feel that when we talk about standards, if we set a standard and every day we seek to achieve and surpass that standard, then we're enjoying the process. We're loving the process. We'll get to the goal. If we don't get to the goal, that's also okay because we left everything out there. Yep. I'm interested in your thoughts on the goals that you've set for yourself, the company, where the company's going. As you look to the horizon, as we talked about many of these things, how are you balancing and adjusting your mental health, the company's where they are, how they're going to conduct their operations as we move into the future?
Yeah. Well, this is like a hot button topic for me, and I feel like we could talk an hour about this, but I do believe in goal setting. I think it can drive real results, but I think the challenge is when people jump straight to the goal, kind of to your point, you're missing the whole purpose of it. You could set a goal to lose 10 pounds, but why? What's the why behind the goal? Starting with what drives you, what matters most, what is the most important thing for you? That for me, my personal mission statement which I say to myself every single morning, that I wrote down probably 15 years ago, that has to inform every goal that I do. Otherwise, it's like, if the objective is to make friends and build a great company, and you set a goal that's incongruent with that or not consistent with that, then it doesn't matter. It's like you're never going to achieve it because it's not consistent with your main mission. And so tying that back to a why is really powerful. But I think goal setting is the easy part, right? It's easy to take a piece of paper and be like, I'm going to lose 10 pounds. What's really, really hard is monitoring that. And I think there are tips and tricks and things that you can do. I'm a big believer in visual cues. I take any goal that I set, it's on my wall. I look at it all the time. But, if I start with my mission, if I start with my why, it can never replace, it can't get in the way of my why. It has to be consistent with my why. And by the way, like, you got to do what works for you. But I haven't met anybody who has accomplished anything big that isn't good at these check-ins, right?
Yeah.
And some people believe in visual goals and writing specific goals, but the people who tend to accomplish more are checking in and saying, are the steps I'm taking consistent with what my ultimate dream and mission and objectives are? Because otherwise we're just kind of floating. There's no progress.
Nate, as we close out, the Jedburghs had to do 3 things every day as core foundational tasks. We can call them habits, if you will. They had to be able to shoot, they had to be able to move, they had to be able to communicate. If they did these 3 things, train these 3 things with the utmost proficiency, then actually in execution every day, they could have applied their focus to more complex challenges that came their way because they didn't have to think about this. What are the 3 things that you do every day to set the conditions for success in your world?
Yeah. Well, the first and most important thing for me is I everybody has different degrees of spirituality, but I always start my morning on my knees. I like to remind myself that I need to be grateful and I need to be humble and realize that I've been given so much. So that for me is a foundational part of my day, and it kind of sets the day up the right way. The second thing that's really important to me is movement. And the modality for me has changed through the years. I have an addictive personality, meaning like I will get obsessed with things. So, I've done deep dives into running and yoga and strength training. But what I've learned is it almost doesn't matter as long as I really move my body for like 45 minutes to 60 minutes, helps like, it's like the grease for the engine. Yeah. And then the third thing is, for my mental health. And so I like to journal. That's what works for me. I spend 10 to 15 minutes planning out my day. I always write down what I'm grateful for and try and take some time to reflect on that. It's one thing to be like, I'm grateful for my wife. She's so great. But closing your eyes and like stepping into it and being like, no, I really, really appreciate my wife, what she does for me, and feeling that emotion, tying it to an emotion and like visualizing it. It's like anything else. It makes a big difference for me. When I do those 3 things, like, I tend to have more successful days.
Start the day with spirituality, have movement of any kind. And I agree with you there. I've gone through all the whole realm of all the different types of workouts, and now I've realized just do something.
Yeah, just
whatever
move.
It is.
Be consistent and move.
And the third one, journal for mental health and gratitude.
Yep.
The 9 characteristics of performance as defined by special operations forces are one of the driving forces within our conversations that we have on the podcast: drive, resiliency, adaptability, humility, integrity, curiosity, team ability, effective intelligence, and emotional strength. High performers, they exhibit these characteristics all the time. That's why special operations uses them as the basis for assessment and selection. We display them in varying degrees depending on the situation that we're in. Never really never all of them at any one time. Every one of these we've covered at some point of our conversation as we've spoken here today. But at the end of these conversations, I take one and I think about the conversation we had. I think about your journey. I think about how you've built this company. You started not in commuter pants, on the commuter train, thinking about how do we disrupt and change this industry? How do we create something? How do we fill this gap? I think about emotional strength, actually, for you, because this, as we mentioned, is an extremely competitive industry. It's a very dynamic industry. There are a lot of forces and factors that affect it. It requires a tremendous amount of maturity to be successful in this industry, something that you've demonstrated, as you've built companies at an early age, as you've been charged with a tremendous amount of responsibility. And every time you've risen to that challenge, you've seen that challenge, you've thought at a more broad scale. You tend at younger ages to get focused inward, and we get myopically focused. It takes a tremendous amount of emotional strength to take a step back, make calm from chaos. You've weathered the storm of COVID, you've pivoted, and we're here in the flagship store on Fifth Avenue. There's so much more to come. There's a line outside because they're waiting for us to be done so that we can get in here and have this event right now. Focus on mental health, focus on fitness. This has been an amazing day.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much.
I'm really an honor to be on with you, and I remember going to breakfast with you and just saying, this is the kind of person I want, in my life, because if we get to choose the people that we spend time around, effectively we're choosing our destiny, and you're the kind of man that I like spending time with. So I appreciate you having me on.
Likewise. Thank you.
Thanks.
American Jedburghs went out to form the foundation of the United States Special Forces and the Special Activities Directorate of the Central Intelligence Agency. Thanks for listening to the Jedburgh Podcast. I'm your creator and host, Fran Racioppi. Join us next week for a new episode on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Check us out on YouTube for full episodes, highlights, and other behind-the-scenes content. If you like what you heard, give us a like and leave a review. Follow me, Fran Racioppi, Talent War Group, and our sponsor Jersey Mike Subs on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter. Send your comments and inquiries to media@talentwargroup.com. As former members of Special Operations Forces, the Jedburgh Podcast and Talent War Group contribute a percentage of all profits to the Special Operations Warrior Foundation, supporting the families of our fallen warriors. Thanks for joining us on this episode. How you prepare today determines success tomorrow.